Welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Cooke. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. We had a fabulous guest coming up for you, Monica Schmelter at Christian Television Network here in Nashville, Tennessee. You don't want to miss her incredible story from a Pakistani background to a station director here and her take on prayer and the importance of that in your life. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one. Welcome to our show today. If you've not been a part of it in the past, I have people telling me now they're binge watching our podcasts because there's so much information. And I know this show is going to be fabulous with you today. I've got a wonderful guest with me, Monica Schmelter, here from Christian Television Network and her television show Bridges. She is a powerhouse of a woman. She is from the United States originally, but her heritage is Pakistani. And she comes from a Muslim background. She has an interesting story of her journey. She started out in Detroit where she met her husband, raised her family, and then God moved her here to Christian Television Network here in Mount Juliet or Nashville, Tennessee, several years ago. Her wonderful show, Bridges, focuses on women and men who have overcome so many challenges in their lives. And so I'm going to let Monica share with you all of those kind of things. So welcome, Monica, to the Influence Women podcast today.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Yes.
I'm so glad to be here and be able to talk to you today.
Yes, I'm so thrilled. So I've said just a few things about your background, but you tell us in your own words a little bit about your journey and how God brought you here to this station. Tell us about the station itself. It's a fabulous facility, and you've done amazing work here. So share with us a little bit today.
Yeah, because God has done so much here. I've worked here for 28 years, and we've always tried, Kathleen, like any nonprofit, to do the best we can with what we have, best quality that we can do. And so this beautiful facility that you see today is the result of a lot of prayer, a lot of people giving. A couple of years ago, we got a really large, unexpected gift that was enough to redo the entire studio, get us new cameras, this podcast room. It was able to cover all of that. And so I just am so in awe and so thankful.
And you're so able to do so many different types of presentations here and content, from big stage type events to a smaller stage. And we're thrilled to be in your podcast studio today. But tell us about your journey a little bit. I know you're Pakistani background,
Yes.
and you've come from that, became a Christian at 13.
Did.
So I'm not going to tell the story, but I want you to tell the story.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating.
So my grandfather came to the United States from Pakistan, and he came here illegally, like it was in the 1930s, and he just had heard about America. He traveled to several countries before he could get here, but he heard about what a land of opportunity and freedom, and that he could get a job and earn a living, and so that's what he came to do, and he did. So he married my grandmother, and she was from the States, and so my mom is 50% Pakistani, and so I'm 25%, and so that heritage was so much a part of our lives. We loved my grandfather so much, and just that just seemed normal to me because that's how he had been raised, and so that's what I saw. And it ended up that my mom had a third baby, my brother, who was born with Down syndrome and was very sick. And a neighbor invited us to church. So for a healing service, and we didn't know what that was, but we did think if there was any way that my brother could be healed, we were all in, even my Muslim grandfather, and at this point, his second wife and their 4 children. So we all piled into church. I was 13, and at first I was just mad because the service was going on forever and ever, and I kept thinking, just pray for my brother so I can get out of here. And I thought,
yes, that's a typical 13-year-old, isn't it?
I thought the people were crazy because they were clapping their hands and raising their hands, and I'm like, what? Like, is this a cult? What is this? After they pray for my brother, I'm like, I can get out of here. But the pastor said, I can't dismiss yet. He said, God has shown me that there are 10 people in here that don't know the Lord. So I counted my row, and there were 10 of us. And I started crying. I realized that I needed Jesus. So I said to my mom, can I go down the aisle? And she said, I guess, because she was so frustrated with me, right? Because I'm a 13-year-old brat.
Yes. No, a teenager.
Yeah. And so I walked down the aisle, and the pastor prays with me. And so my parents at that point didn't continue going to church with me. However, they very kindly drove me every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And so I never looked back from that point.
Such a great, beautiful story. And you went on, grew up, met your husband, and lived in Detroit.
Yes.
So tell us about the journey in becoming the director of this station and how God has taken you into media specifically.
Yes.
An early calling in your life, really.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I really prayed, God, what do you want me to do? And I felt that I was to study television and broadcasting in college. And in my mind, Kathleen, this meant that I was going to start out being a reporter for a news station and then be an anchor. Because that's really all I knew. So when I got out of college, I prayed about what networks to apply at. And I felt like God said no. And I thought that is very strange because I thought you just asked me to do that. So I didn't apply. I got another offer from the Detroit Rescue Mission to write radio copy and to do some other things. And it ended up, after I'd worked there about a year, I met the president of the Christian Television Network in Detroit, and he offered me a job without me applying.
Yep, God's direction.
Yeah, so I did that for a few years, and then my husband and I became pregnant, and I was a stay-at-home mom
Yes.
for a few years.
Been there, done that.
Yes, and so that was
so important. And really difficult, too, for women.
Yes.
Trying to balance that work-life, job, career situation, especially in media that's so demanding.
Yes, and so I was able to do some freelance work, but I'm so grateful that I could be with our son. Even though that can be isolating and you feel like, oh, am I going to get behind, right, in my career? What is going to happen? But you have a baby that needs you. So we did that, and then we moved here. And when we got here, my husband said, well, you're so good at TV. Go volunteer for that station. So I did.
Yeah, we have to obey our husbands occasionally, just occasionally.
Yeah. First I told him, I said, I really don't want to volunteer. And he said, no, I really think that God wants you to do this. So I started as a volunteer.
Love it.
And then they offered me something part-time about 6 months later. And then one night I had a dream that I was doing a show. And I woke up and I told my husband, I had this dream. And I said I was doing a show. I said it was kind of like the 700 Club. And my husband's like a really steadfast, stable guy. Like I'm more kind of up and down. And my husband's just like, well, if that's God, it'll happen. And I came to work that day, and my boss said, Monica, we would like you to host Bridges, and we would like it to be a daily show. And it was like, okay, that was God.
And was Bridges already a show established? So you really had to start the train on the track, right?
I did.
And that's challenging. I know so many women out there are wanting to do that. And they have this great idea of starting, but then really actually launching that, it's
a lot of work.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. And so I asked, do we have a budget for the set? And they laughed at me. So I literally got some stores and things to donate some things. It was not a nice set at all. But because I had that dream, I just knew that I was supposed to move forward. So I just said, okay, God, you work this out. I'm a little embarrassed about this, but if this is what you've said, I'll do it. And you're right. A lot of people have an idea. TV media looks pretty easy. It really does. But it takes a lot of work.
It does.
Preparing for guests, inviting guests.
And collaboration.
Yes. It's a lot of work. So I just jumped right in there, and I just kept at it, and 28 years later, I'm still doing it.
I love it. Why the name Bridges?
Yes.
Why?
So people laugh because my boss said that's what you're going to call it.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of over the years transitioned that, and now it's just a bridge, hope for the journey, how to get over and overcome the things that we all face in our life. We've all got stuff.
Yes.
And I love to focus on comeback stories. You
Oh,
know,
I love that,
things
too.
that have just been really hard for people. So I say, you know, Bridges, it's hope for the journey, because we're all on a journey.
That's exactly right. And it's the people and the relationships that matter, and hearing that if she could do it or he could do it, I can do it too.
Exactly.
I can see myself in that story. I mean, that's the Jesus model, isn't
Yes,
it? Jesus
yes.
told stories. It's so important. So I'm going to just relate a story back to you that I read about you that I
Okay.
loved.
Okay.
And it was the story about the importance of prayer in your life. From an early on, you had a perfume box that you filled with strips of paper with people's names on it that you were praying with.
Yes.
Tell us about that, how that started, and how important that is and significant that is. Sometimes I think people think something silly like that, just putting a person's name on a strip of paper, can be meaningless, have no substance to it, just a silly thing. But God sees our heart, and I believe even the physical part of writing a name down on a piece of paper brings it back to our memory. It allows us to go back and read those names. So I'm sorry, I'm just telling the whole thing, but you tell me.
Because, that box is 50
yes.
years old, and I still have it.
I love
and I
it.
still have those things that I wrote down. So, my parents were driving me to church, and I'm like 13 years old, and I feel pretty alone because I see everybody else with their families. And so I invited them to church, but nobody wanted to go. And so the pastor preached a sermon and talked about prayer, and I thought, oh, well, that's what I need to do. I need to pray for my family to get saved. So I just grabbed that perfume box and started writing out my prayers to God. And when you talk about simple and silly, like one day I'm writing in black ink, once it's red, I'm drawing flowers in purple because I'm a teenager.
Yeah.
But I'm writing my heart out.
Yes.
Asking God, to heal my brother, to give my parents a desire to give their hearts to Christ, my Muslim grandfather, all of these people. And I'm praying and praying, and I discovered how important it is to pray and how God visits us as we pray. And so all of those prayers, when I look through that box now, he's answered in one way or another, and my family has come to Christ. And my Muslim grandfather, before he passed away a few years, he gave his heart to Christ.
Love it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So important. Prayer is the key. I love the story of Nehemiah even, and that he started his whole journey with prayer and fasting.
Yes.
And I'm a real advocate of Nehemiah right now in the whole book, and it's the leadership that he had, and restoring the walls around Jerusalem in 52 days that had fallen so quickly when people had been moaning and groaning about the temple being exposed and nothing there around it to protect it. And Nehemiah was taken when he heard his brothers and friends come visit him in Babylon, where he was serving as the king's cupbearer and food taster, basically. And Nehemiah was so distraught, the first thing he did was get on his knees and pray.
Exactly.
And confess. And so I believe in our day and age right now, prayer is so important. I believe prayer has changed many things. We have just come through an election where prayer was a huge part of that. And we're continuing now to pray for our nation, to pray for the other nations, because other nations are so dependent on what we do here in the United States.
Yes.
And so I love the fact that your foundation and your resource is in prayer.
And, because I was 13 and because I hadn't been to church up until that time, Kathleen, I really didn't know how to pray. I'm just writing out my heart what I thought was the right thing. And that speaks to me today that so many people will hold back from prayer because you think, well, I don't know how to do it. But if you're honest before God, it doesn't matter. He sees our hearts. He sees all of it. And he's shown me time and again over the years. There was one Sunday my dad's going to drop me off in our silver station wagon to church, and we got in an argument. And I wanted to ask my dad to take me home because I was upset. But I knew if I did that, it might make a bigger argument at home. So I went on into church, and the pastor talked about praying big and praying specifically. So on my little strips of paper, I wrote, God, make my dad so on fire for the Lord that he'll join the praise team.
That's a big prayer.
It is. It is. And
That's a big prayer.
Yes, it was 25 years before my parents got saved. Mm-hmm. But, I forgot about that piece of paper, and I never counted it anything but a win. And about 4 years ago, my mom called me, and she goes, your dad wants to do something crazy, and I want you to tell him not to do it. And now, mind you, they're 83. I said, Mom, what is it that he wants to do? She goes, well, he plays the trumpet. I said, I know. She said, he wants to join the church orchestra. She said, and I need you to tell him not to do that. And I said, Mom, I can't. I said, I prayed for that when I was 14, so we're just going to have to let him do it. And it ended up he could only do it for 3 services because of his health. But my husband and I got to go and see that happen. And my parents' church is a quiet one. But I wanted to run around and scream, like, I prayed for this when I was 14, like, God brought this back. And so I think with prayer, it's not always how or when, but if we will be faithful, God answers those prayers, and he does amazing things that we can't even think about.
Yes.
To think at 83 years old, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think of the number of women and men who are also watching, they binge watch on us as well.
Which is great.
Which is great. I love it. We welcome those men. Come on in. We'll be happy to have you in. But I think of the number of women who are in the industry, in a very challenging industry.
Yes.
Television, film, music is hard.
Yes, it is.
We talked about that earlier. And breaking in and writing scripts and going for auditions. The average actress in America or in Los Angeles will audition for 100 different things before they get asked to be on one show or one commercial or do one thing. So often we're volunteering and giving our talents away for free many times. And so those challenges, we have so many women that need to hear the importance of just making sure that they're on their knees and praying every day for each other. That's why we established Influence Women too, is so that we could grow this community of believers in the foundations and the wisdom of the Bible who could then change the content we're seeing in our screens. We have to stop protesting, stop screaming about what we're seeing in our screens, and supporting the people who are making that content in our screens.
That's right. We can't expect lost people to act like Christian people.
Right.
So they're not going to create that kind of content. But like you said, if we will get on our knees and pray and get in community and pray in agreement and celebrate with one another. Because God has a different path for all of us. He doesn't work in our lives in a cookie-cutter way. But I want to support, women and women that are younger than me to be able to say, if God has called you to do this, you can and you will. Stay humble. Stay on your knees. Of course, we work hard, to perfect the craft as much as we can. But God has to open the door.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we pray for that, and we stand with each other on that. So that you kind of brought up another subject I'd love for you to talk about a little bit, and that is you're passionate because of your background, starting at the age of 13 as a teen, when most people and most teens today really are turning away from their faith. We have that in large numbers in the United States, or they're looking for something that they can rely on and trust in our culture and our world today. You have a passion for young women especially. So talk to us about that passion in your life, why we need to raise up this next generation who can create. They're already creating the content. They're already on TikTok. They're already on Snapchat. They're already on Instagram, social media. They're already doing that and making huge having huge influence in our life. So talk to us about that passion in your life because of your background.
So when I came to Christ at 13, I had already run away from home a couple of times. I was experimenting with drugs, so I was on that not good path. But when God found me, in that service, he opened my eyes to see what true purpose and what true meaning was. And so I'm very passionate about sharing that with women, to stay obedient to God, faithful to God, because there's no other way to live in a godly, successful way. And so I'm very passionate. Like when I see people in the TikTok and the influencers, okay, so all of that is great, but some of it's not wonderful content. And I want to see pure content. I want to be able to see young women and older women laugh at clean jokes, at a good kind of fun. And I believe that with God's help, He can give us that kind of influence, and He can give us the resources we need if we stay on our knees, we're obedient, and we're in agreement with people of like faith that can help us.
Right. Prayer, obedience, and connections with collaboration, and growing our skills and talents. So important. As we wrap here with young women talking about who they are and their identity, we also have older women or women who've been in the business for a while. And we know that they are challenged. As a final comment with us today, talk to us about one or two things that women can do right now to grow their career, meet the challenges, and grab the dream that God's laid in their heart and stand on that.
So I think first it's to be clear about what it is that you want to do. If that's to write a book, if that's to write a screenplay, if that's to do a TV show, really pray on that and develop it. I always say be prepared. Like you never know when someone's going to call. What if that great moment comes? And then persistent, right? Continue to knock on doors. It's not comfortable to be rejected or to have somebody say no. But you'll never get a yes if you're not willing to risk.
That's right.
And so perfecting your craft, keeping that in prayer, knocking on doors, and counting it all joy in the meantime.
Yes.
And understanding that sometimes those rejections and those twists and turns are the very thing that develop our character and give us compassion. I know some of the things that I've gone through have made me a compassionate, kind person, concerned about other people. And that's so important if you're going to be in front of a camera or behind a camera, writing a book. That as Christians, right, that we have character that represents Jesus well.
Yes, I love it. Love it. Thank you so much for having us here today. I love being in your studio and your facilities, and I love hearing your story and your heart. It encourages me, and I'm hoping it's encouraging all of you out there as well that are listening. And we're just so pleased and joyous that you've had us here today and shared who you are and how God has impacted your life and done so many great things for this station, and I know for in the future as well. Yes. So I encourage all of you to watch Bridges. How can our viewers watch Bridges, and how can we get a hold of you a little bit more?
So if they go to bridgeswithmonica.com, there are all the ways to watch: Roku, regular TV, direct dish. On Life Audio, we've got a Bridges podcast. So bridgeswithmonica.com will take you instructions to all the places.
Great. Bridgeswithmonica.com. So perfect. Great. Thanks so much, Monica.
Thank you.
Blessings. Well, thanks for joining us today for the Influence Women podcast. You know, Monica's story was so dynamic, and I know that you want to pass that on to the next person. So don't forget to like us and click that bell so that you see every time we have the next podcast drop on the Influence Women YouTube channel. Influence Women is growing around the world. We have chapter groups all over in many cities in the United States. We want you to become a member at influencewomen.org. Also, join us at the live events that are happening. We're doing them online and in person. So check out the many events that you can join wherever you are coming from today, and grow your skills and talents in media, entertainment, arts, music, and leadership. We want to inspire you, encourage you, and grow you into being the best you could possibly be. So don't forget to like us. Leave a comment as well. Will you leave a comment for me? I always want to hear back from women. So let us know how this show impacted your life. Stay tuned for the next one. See you next time.